I want to welcome all of you here present in the Cathedral and to everyone who joins us online from your homes as this programme events marking the 10th year of the Four Corners Festival draws to a close. I'm honoured to welcome His Grace the Archbishop. Your Grace, Céad Míle Fáilte, 100,000 welcomes. And I've no doubt that staying with Bishop Noel, visiting the Redemptorist Fathers up in Clonard for lunch today, and taking part in the wonderful wander yesterday, you have experienced the welcome and the hospitality that we Irish are famed for. We look forward to hearing your words in a little while. As always, we strive to keep everyone safe, so may I ask you to remain in your seats for the duration of this evening. Should there be a need to evacuate the Cathedral, the exits are through the west doors that you entered through, and there are also exits to your right in the confessional chapel and to your left in the mortuary chapel, and there are stewards on hand should anyone need assistance. So now, as we begin, I'd like to hand you over to Steve and Martin, to the other Father Martin.
Good evening. It's wonderful to be in St. Peter's again. I see. I was mic'd up. I thought that was okay. It's good to see you tonight in St. Peter's. Can I just ask for a show of hands before we start anything? Is there anybody in here tonight who has never been here before? Wow. Now that's what Four Corners Festival is about, taking us to other parts of our city and introducing ourselves to other places that we've maybe never been, and maybe you might have a conversation with somebody beside you that you've never met, and Father Martin loves it when you take out your phone, take their phone number, and go and meet them for coffee sometime. This is our 10th anniversary festival. We can hardly imagine that that has happened. And for the 10th anniversary festival, we began last week with a message from Pope Francis in St. Anne's Cathedral, and tonight we're finishing with the Archbishop of Canterbury in St. Peter's Cathedral. Is that really true, Father Martin? It is really true. So thank you very much for supporting us as you have done over many years, but particularly in this 10th anniversary. You're in for a wonderful night this evening. Can I just do those things that need to be done? Sadly, well, not sadly, delightedly, there's no questionnaires on your seats, which is joyous. You're going to get out of the building in plenty of time and not have to answer questions. However, there are surveys online, and we value these surveys because not only for us to find out who's at the festival, who's not at the festival, what went well or not, you find that funders ask questions that surveys answer. So for us to find funders next year, these surveys are very vital, and we would love it if you would take a moment online to fill out those questionnaires. And then the funders, we would like to thank them again for all that they do for the festival during the year, particularly the Executive Office Central Good Relations Funding Programme and the Department of Foreign Affairs Reconciliation Fund. Martin, did I do that all right?
Not quite. You've actually gone into some of my lines. But anyway, never mind.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
But you have my lines, so thank you. So just earlier today, someone was saying to me when we talked there about the likes of the Department of Foreign Affairs Reconciliation Fund. This is actually the Irish government, to make that absolutely clear. Jim Deeds is giving us a thumbs up from the back, which means, I presume, we can be heard. Yes, great. So a word of thanks to our funders, and then just moving in now to the question of donations, which we want to go through very quickly. We want this to be sustainable. It's a year-by-year application process. I'll not go into this whole idea, but it'd be lovely to get multi-year funding. That's a conversation for another place. So it's the whole question of trying to sustain the festival. At the back of the cathedral this evening, there are flyers which give us the details of how to help us. So the likes of the tesseracts, these are the red boxes here. There will be eventually with some of our volunteers, some of our members of committee, at the back of the church by the time you leave, so you can put in cash donations that way. We've now moved to texting, and I'm certainly not going to start to go into the details of text numbers to give you the details of that. They're all can be found on the flyers, as can also the details of how to donate through the website, as well as the Friends of the Festival. There's also QR codes, and again, all that can be found on the flyer at the back.
Can I just say that I don't think anybody is aware of how badly I did that and how much you saved the day. So I just get everything wrong there, and this man has seen us here wonderfully.
Steve, thank you. So for those who have been following us each day, and maybe gone back to those who were present in St Anne's Cathedral last Sunday evening for an incredible evening, will remember one of our former committee members, Jasper Rutherford, share his reflection on the festival, tell us a little about his story, his powerful story. So we've come to that part, our final contributor, who in fact actually was the very, very first person to share an evening in the first Four Corners Festival in 2013. It took place in Ballygomartin Presbyterian Church. So I'm delighted to welcome Tony Mccauley, writer, broadcaster, facilitator, consultant. I could go on and on. And that particular evening, Tony was coming to have some readings from his wonderful book, Paperboy. If you haven't read it, really worth reading. Very serious at times, but enormously funny. I happened to be reading it on a plane and was laughing out loud at various stages, and I had people looking at me in the aisles. But it was a really moving evening in Ballygomartin Presbyterian, because actually in some ways Tony was writing about that very church. So I'm going to invite Tony now to come and share with us his object as we celebrate this 10th anniversary.
Good evening, and thank you very much for the invitation to be part of this evening. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm particularly delighted to be, for the first time in my life, in this beautiful cathedral, in spite of the fact that I grew up just over a mile from here. So Four Corners continues to do that. I will never forget, actually, that event in Ballygomartin Presbyterian Church, the first Four Corners Festival event 10 years ago. And it was very special for me for two reasons. The first reason was I had just come back from my first book tour in the USA, which for me had been such an exciting experience. And I'd been doing book readings in all these amazing places that I never imagined I would find myself standing up and talking about being a paperboy up the Shankill in the 1970s. But the event that I remember most of all the book readings that I've done anywhere was that evening back in Ballygomartin Presbyterian Church, for two reasons. The first was, that is where I grew up. That's where so many of the stories in that book, Paperboy, are set. And so it was really, really special to me to come home. I had a sense of coming home that evening. But the second reason why it was special to me was that we were sitting in Ballygomartin Presbyterian Church, and there were people from the four corners of this city in the church that I had grew up in. And that would have been unthinkable when I was growing up there as a child. And I was particularly touched and delighted that evening of the number of people who came to that event from the Falls Road, crossing the peace line and sharing together in a Presbyterian church at the top of the Shankill Road. And for me, that was the very beginnings of what Four Corners was all about, and it was special to me. Shortly after that event, one of the members of Ballygomartin Presbyterian Church contacted me and said, when you did the book reading that night, you read about your parents running the Westy Disco in the church. And I've something special I want to give you. So the story is that my parents were volunteers in the youth club, and they ran a disco every Saturday night. And they crammed 400 kids into a little Nissen hut every Saturday night and kept kids from the Shankle Road off the streets and safe throughout the Troubles. And no such thing as health and safety in those days, I can tell you. We were crammed into this little hut. But my father was the DJ. He was known as the oldest DJ in town, even then. And he played the records every Saturday night. And the last record that was played every Saturday night at the Westy Disco, to let all us teenagers know that the disco was over, was The Last Waltz by Engelbert Humperdinck. Now, even in the 1970s, that was kind of old-fashioned. So it soon cleared the floor of the disco. But we also knew when the first few bars of The Last Waltz came on that it was time to take your chance and ask that girl out that you fancied and you'd been wanted to get close to all evening. And so once The Last Waltz was played, we paired up, we had our slow dance, and I maybe asked a girl to come with me to the chippy for a fish supper and a pickled egg. And so it's a memory of first love for me every time I hear The Last Waltz. But it's also more important than that to me as well, because the reason my father chose it as the last dance every Saturday night was because it was my parents' song. And every time he played it, he was telling my mother that he loved her. So that song, that single by Engelbert Humperdinck, was very special to me for those two reasons, young love and my parents' love. And so after the Four Corners event, this friend from the church said he was in the attic and he found The Last Waltz by Engelbert Humperdinck. And it still has on it Ballygomartin Youth Club, stuck on the 45 on masking tape that my father had borrowed from Mackey's Foundry. And here it is. So that's the object that I want to share with you this evening. It represents for me young love, the love of my parents, and the love that I believe is at the heart of this one community of Belfast, that for me is represented in the Four Corners Festival. So I would like to congratulate you on 10 years of Four Corners. Thank you for consistently revealing and nurturing the love that, in spite of all that the rest of the world may say or think of us, we know is at the heart of this one community of Belfast. Thank you.
What a wonderful story to everybody except Leslie, Tony's wife, who's asking, who were all those girls you took for a pickled egg? When the planning committee heard that the Archbishop of Canterbury was going to be here tonight, this is how our brains work. I immediately went, singer! Who could we have to share a stage with the Archbishop of Canterbury on the last evening of our Four Corners Festival? And within seconds, I knew who I wanted that to be. Dana Masters was brought up in South Carolina, where her grandmother, Johnny Ruth Jenkins, was a civil rights leader. She graduated from the University of Minneapolis in music, and while she was there, played with Prince's guitarist and even got to sing with Kanye West. She headed to LA and fell in love with a guy from Ireland, Andrew Masters, who is now senior pastor at Lagan Valley Vineyard. Thank you so much, Andrew, for marrying Dana and bringing her here. Local jazz trumpeter Lindley Hamilton made her a jazz singer, or led her in that direction. And after 6 years touring with Van Morrison, she's recorded her own songs with the Ulster Orchestra and the RTE Concert Orchestra. She's written lovely lines about Belfast. I wasn't looking for home, but home found me. The wide open arms of your hills pulled me in. I fell for your charms and your wild northern winds. Tonight, or this morning, she had a bit of a shock because her keyboard player texted her to say that he'd got COVID. Johnny has stood in, and Johnny has a gig at 8 o'clock in the Empire. So I need to shut up and get them on this stage. But there was nobody more perfect to be here tonight, in my opinion, for our 10th anniversary closing event than the wonderful Dana Masters.
I think that might be my most favorite introduction I've ever gotten. So thorough. And thank you all for having me here. It's such an honor and a pleasure. And the lyrics that Steve was quoting there is the song I'm going to sing here now, which is my love song to this island. So here you are. Lost my way in a desert land, searching for somewhere I could stand. High and dry, I crossed the sea, wasn't looking for home, but home found me. The wide open arms of your hills pulled me in. I fell for your charms and your wild northern winds. And then you lay me down and whispered soft and sweet, I'll be your home if you let me. Lost my way in a desert land, searching for somewhere I could stand. High and dry, I crossed the sea, wasn't looking for home, but home found me. The wide open arms of your hills pulled me in. I fell for your charms and your wild northern winds. And then you lay me down and whispered soft and sweet, I'll be your home if you let me. Nothing to give I had, nothing to bring. Still you held my hand and eased my suffering. And when I close my eyes, I still hear you breathe. And with every sigh, you give life to me. The wide open arms of your hills pull me in. I fell for your charms and your wild northern winds. And then you lay me down and whispered soft and sweet, I'll be your home if you let me. and as deep as your seas, the winds of your kindness are blowing right through me. And as you hold me close, I whisper quietly, I'll call you home if you let me. I'll call you home if you let me. I'll call you home if you let me. Thank you. Thank you very much. I normally end all my shows with that song, and just to say a massive thank you to the people of this island who have taken me in and shown enormous levels of hospitality. And I always like, when I am home, when I am on the island, I always like to remind people here who are from Ireland that you have that you carry that gift of hospitality that is wild, and you take it for granted, but it is absolutely a gift, and to keep giving that to the people and to the other and to the visitor and to the immigrant like myself. Thank you so much. I did not grow up in nature. I now live on the side of a mountain, and I'm well acquainted with those wild northern winds now. But when I was growing up, I was a city girl, and going for a walk felt like a massive adventure that was a little too much for me. I liked being in front of the television. But I married a man who climbs mountains. And when you marry a man who climbs mountains, every once in a while you got to go climb a mountain with him. So my appreciation for nature has grown over the last 13 years. And this is a song called Rising that sort of talks about that love, that newfound love of nature that I have now. Sun is rising, the very same he does every day. He is still shining, even when the clouds are in his way. Moon is glowing, humming her sweet mellow refrain, calling the waters to come gaze on her face. And I am undone. I want to learn to live like this, allowing the simple magic to steal my heart again. Wind is blowing, cooling the heat of what has been, moving and shifting till what's left is all there is. And the trees are dancing, 'cause they have a secret hidden within, always trusting after death a new life will begin. And I am undone, 'cause I want to learn to live like this, allowing the simple magic to steal my heart again. The rhythms of the world are moving me towards the peace of letting go of all the worries and the things I can't control. Steal my heart, yeah. Steal my heart. Steal my heart. Steal my heart. Steal my heart again. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to do one more song for you for now. This song is very near and dear to my heart. Steve mentioned my grandmother, Johnny Ruth Jenkins, who was, in fact, a civil rights activist in my home state of South Carolina. She, a couple of years ago, had a highway in South Carolina named after her, which was wonderful. Sadly, she wasn't allowed to see the highway, but it's there, and we're very, very proud of her. But even more than that, my grandmother had 5 children. How she did that, had a full-time job in social justice, and I don't know how she did it, but she had 5 children. And these 5 children were the first children in their county to desegregate their school system. And when my mother did that, who's the youngest of the 5, she was only 8 years old. I grew up knowing that fact about my family, but it wasn't until recently that it really hit me how profound that experience would have been for them. The civil rights movement in the States was a difficult time for the people involved in it. For adults, it was traumatic in some ways. And can you imagine children being involved in it? I like to say that it's kind of like going on the front line of a war, that we put children on the front line of that war. And my aunts and my uncles and my mom, they weren't unique in that way. There were thousands of children across America who did the exact same thing. And just like with war, when not everyone comes home and not everyone comes home okay, the same could be said for those children. That not all of them made it back okay and in one piece. And even within my own family, we have people who just didn't make it back okay from that experience. And it made me wonder, I'm a mother now, and it made me wonder that if my grandmother was alive today and could pen a letter to her children, specifically her daughters, more specifically one daughter in particular, I wonder what she would say. I think I know my grandmother enough to know that she probably would not have done it any differently. But I think maybe she would have some words, some way of processing what her children had to carry in order to get us from where we were to where we are today. And so I used my imagination and penned a letter on behalf of my grandmother. And this letter is called Little Girl. Little girl, this letter I write to you, it won't be enough for you. Forgive me. Ooh, little girl, I thought I should explain. I never meant you to have this pain. Please forgive me. Love grows tattered, stretched and worn. Spread It's a crazy world. Ain't no heroes and ain't no saints. Just the fallout from choices made. Baby girl, believe me. Oh, love grows tender, stretched and warm, spread too thin to keep you warm. Please forgive me. Oh, please forgive me. I wish that I could take all the pieces of your broken heart and pull them in and mend them, oh, with my strong, strong arms. Ooh, no, we shall overcome. Oh, we shall, oh God, I hope we overcome. Oh, we believe one day we're gonna overcome. Little girl, little girl, please forgive me.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, John.
Oh my. This week Jim Deeds has been doing, and Mccauley have been doing night prayers, and each night they've had an artist who's shown some of his work or her work during that, and a couple of them really took me this week, and I've written this. One of them was Paul Hutchison's map of Belfast, where he changed things to First Kiss Gardens and Stray Cat or Stray Dog Alley and Redemption Park, and on that map I noticed sunken treasures, and I thought that might be something of the festival. And if you've been to the festival this week, spot some of the other references to events. Sunken, going deep, deep soul in the old wrecks of conflict or storm, where the seas of time grind down to dust or rust. Hear the frightening creaking of bows now breaking, like our past is speaking about our lazy repeating of tides. Hope-filled divers, their hearts a-tingle, go deep, deep down where buried treasure mingles. Redemptive torches shining, mining in different corners where precious pearls might be found. By the light of grace in a tragic place, to make new from old histories told, now given spaces between bridges, holy places not yet finished, for stories and songs and art to blend and blur. We'll hurl too shallow that carelessly unhallowed the gift-giving creator of one another, and the abundance of here, dearly given to all who dare to share, common ground, good home. So we dive deeper for treasures sunken. It is hard to even imagine what I'm going to say next, but I would like to welcome the Archbishop of Canterbury to the Four Corners Festival. I spent yesterday afternoon with him, and can I say, whatever you believe about his words tonight, his life is the Word made flesh. He's the authentic, real thing. And I welcome him in the depths of my heart, thankful that he's here in St. Peter's tonight, the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Holy Spirit of God, you have opened our hearts through music, through words, through art, through memory, through architecture. Come now and lift our minds that we may imagine beyond what we see. Amen. I'm a bit lost for words. I mean, I've got a lot of words written down in front of me, but I'm a bit lost for words after the introduction. Thank you, Steve. I think as one of the Marx brothers said, if you can fake authenticity, you've got it made. But I have to say that to speak after that music, and particularly that last song, with all that it means in the civil rights history, south of the Mason-Dixon line in the United States, and in the era in which we live, was profoundly moving and a great honour. It's also a huge honour to be here with you at this festival. But nobody told me when I agreed to do this that I'd be following the Pope. To say that His Holiness is a tough act to follow is rather like saying that Everest takes a bit of climbing. But I am privileged to call him a friend and brother, and it is an extraordinary privilege to be here. One of the things we share in the meetings we've had is a passion for peace building, for all kinds of reasons. I mean by peace building or reconciliation, and I know that can be quite a dodgy word, but I mean by that enabling people to disagree well. I don't mean to agree, I mean to disagree, but to disagree well. To relish, to feast on the vast and beautiful diversity of our humanity while loving one another and living in peace. Because when there is violence, as you know so well, we lose control of everything. When the guns start firing and the bombs start blasting and the machetes start flashing, there is no means of seeing where you're going, which is why we should be praying so much for peace in Eastern Europe at the moment. A few years ago, after 2.5 years of continual work by a team at Lambeth Palace, a young woman called Martha and a Nigerian bishop in his early 70s called Precious, well named, working for both the Vatican and for us, a retreat was held at the Vatican for leaders, political and religious, of the South Sudan, with the Pope and the former moderator of the Church of Scotland and myself leading the retreat. I mean, can you imagine that 50 years ago? That was a miracle. These are churches that have been separated for half a millennium. And South Sudan is a country torn apart by war, violence, by war and conflict since the 1950s, and where the civil war, which broke out on December the 15th, 2013, raged through until early 2019. And on that retreat, and it was too long a story to tell you, but it was a miracle that it ever happened. On that retreat, there were more miracles. I'm only going to mention two. The first was the profound sense that God was present. If you ever feel inadequate, imagine the situation where you're sitting facing a group of warlords and generals in a country that has known 400,000 dead in the last 4 years and 2.5 million refugees and internally displaced people. And you're looking at them, at the leaders, and all you've got are some words. But somehow God was there, and that was the first miracle. And the result of that was those leaders did not just speak to each other as fellow political leaders. That would have been a big step forward. But they spoke to each other as fellow human beings, people just like them, who knew suffering and grief and loss, and who were deeply affected by the events that they had gone through. And the second miraculous, astonishing thing was something Pope Francis did. I hope this bit of the mic is on as well. Something Pope Francis... Oh, hands waving at the back. Something... I like walking around when I'm speaking. This is going to get really frustrating. I'll hold on to this thing. I wonder if it moves. No. At the end of the retreat, the second day, the Pope came and he gave an address about the gaze of Christ. It was utterly beautiful. And then he got up and he went round the table we were sitting behind, and he went over, and all the leaders stood up, because this is the Pope. And he fell on his knees in front of the President, and he kissed the President's feet, shoes. And he said, "I beg you, make peace." And then he went to the main rebel leader, and he did the same thing. And he went through the 5 main leaders there. They were... I mean, there's no protocol rules about what you do when the Pope's kissing your shoes. You know, you can look it up and it just doesn't tell you the answer. And they were literally, I could see tears running down their faces. It was genuinely it was a washing of feet. Tears were running down every face there, including the BBC cameraman, and he'd seen a bit. And I won't say the war ended, but it was the turning point. And God willing, sometime in the next few months, perhaps year, we will go and see them in Juba, not in Rome, and see what progress can be made. And that is history as well. Peace, harmony, reconciliation often seems totally unobtainable. Whether it's a war or a familial conflict or even within yourself. You may have seen in this part of the world so many attempts of peace that you've given up hope that it could ever happen. But we believe in the God who raised Jesus Christ from the dead. And so death and evil is overcome, and we are invited to live a resurrection life. We can believe in finding peace, in disagreeing well and seeking the abundant life and flourishing of all. But to do that, we must do what the Pope did. We must take risks and make sacrifices for peace. Because without risk and sacrifice, there is only the illusion which is given by the absence of fighting. There is not true peace. We can see that resurrection life in the witness of people who have themselves made the long and painful journey from enemy to friend. A people who've allowed themselves to become living stones built into a different and new community. And if there's anyone who knows this in Europe, in our islands above all, if there is any community that has walked this journey and made the hard choices of forgiveness, repentance and reconciliation, or at least begun them, it's here on this island, in this part of this island. There remain, of course, huge challenges, but the people of Northern Ireland in my lifetime have, as you know so well, begun hesitantly to walk together. And that is the point of this festival. And with enormous courage, you offer us this gift of witness to the God who can turn any dead end into a turning point. A civil war and 400,000 dead into a moment of hope. It is for the people of Northern Ireland to give testimony to your experience rather than for me to lecture you about reconciliation. For so many in this city and across this part of the world will remember the devastation of conflict and will have far more to tell me than I have to tell you about the fragile flower of peace. And I do not presume to instruct you, but to encourage, God willing. First, with some examples of peace building, and secondly, with some of the principles I draw. Years ago, I worked as the Canon for Reconciliation at Coventry Cathedral. That's why I wear this cross as a bishop. It's a Coventry Cross. I'll come back to that. You may know the story of the cathedral at Coventry. Some of you may have been there. It was bombed during World War II on November the 14th, 1940. They bombed the city. It was full of factories making aero engines and tanks and stuff, and I suspect from 10,000 feet, the roof of a cathedral and the roof of a factory looked pretty similar, but they bombed it. It was a lovely medieval cathedral. In the following days and weeks, powerful symbols emerged from the ruins. On the day after the bombing, standing in the smouldering ruins of cathedral and city, Dick Howard, the provost, the administrator of the cathedral, the dean, as we'd call it in the Anglican Church today, took a bit of burnt wood, and behind the ruined high altar, he wrote the words, "Father, forgive." And someone said, you mean Father, forgive them? And he said, no, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. At Christmas, 6 weeks later, he spoke on the BBC. And I should have said, by the way, because I've had a WhatsApp from one of my colleagues, my greetings to those who are watching online. Oh, there's the camera. I haven't forgotten you. It's lovely to have you with us. And he spoke on the BBC on Christmas Day, on the main broadcast. Remember, this was December the 25th, 1940, the depths of the darkest point of the Second World War. And he said that after this war is over, let us rebuild a kinder, more Christ-child-like world, and let us forgive our enemies. What courage and risk that took. Some people, even when I was in Coventry in the 1990s or early 2000s, older people had still not forgiven that man for saying that, because it was so horrendous after what they'd suffered. And colleagues of his, the verger, the sacristan and others, they took the thousands of nails that had fallen from the burning beams and turned them into crosses. And after the Second World War, they took those crosses to Italy, to Germany, to Japan. And then as the years went by, they took them round the world to places of conflict as a symbol of reconciliation. There are some Cross of Nails centres in Northern Ireland. At Lagan College would be one example. And since then, the new Coventry Cathedral has become a symbol of reconciliation worldwide. And it was there, when I was working there, that one day I was talking to one of the guides to the cathedral. It's an amazing place. An elderly man who told me about his experiences that dark night in 1940 when he was a child. And on that night, the cathedral was bombed and his brother was killed. He said to me, a couple of days ago, I saw 3 people standing outside the glass west screen of the cathedral. It wasn't a wall, it's just glass you can see through. And these 3 people kept coming towards the door and moving away, 2 women and a man. And eventually we opened the door and said, do come in, because they didn't seem able to do so. And they looked hesitant, but they came in and wandered around. And then the man came up to me and said, I need to tell you something. I've been to Coventry once before, but I was in a bomber. I'm German, and I was above the city. The guide told me his first instinctive reaction was to clench his fist by his side. But he thought to himself, I've spent 20 years telling this story. I'm not going to give up now. And he said to the man, I forgive you. He wasn't even sure if he meant it, but once he'd said it, he knew it was true. It is small actions and choices made by individuals like Dick Howard or the guide in which we see the person of Jesus. He may be seen by almost no one else, but it's a step towards his kingdom. And this is how reconciliation, peace building is often done, not by swashbuckling figures on the streets or by grandiose acts, but by people who look like Jesus, a figure you could have walked past in the street and not looked twice at, a baby born in a crowded town on a busy night, and if you were just a few streets away, you wouldn't even realize that God had just landed on this world. God coming to us in Jesus means that he became part of the conflict and scarring and struggle and pain that we all endure. Anyone who builds peace must be someone who shares in pain. Reconciliation means risk and sacrifice. And then I think of another example, my friend Bishop Desiree. I first met him when I was working at Coventry, and I went to see him in Goma, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the DRC. The city was under siege at the time, and we wandered around, and there was a lot of trouble. And within the area of the siege, he took me to a refugee camp, one of many in the area. There were about 25,000 people in that camp, 250,000 in other camps within his parish. As I walked with him through the camp, I was overwhelmed and said, "How do you find the resilience to keep going?" "Oh," he said, "we do what God gives us the resources to do, and then we leave the rest to God. We can only do what we can do. The Four Corners Festival can only do what it can do. It can't wave a magic wand and solve all the problems, but it can be a symbol of peace and hope." Desiree used to go up into the militia areas. He became a bishop in about 2014, 2015. And he used to go in his diocese up into the militia areas where they said they'd kill him if he went. And he used to hold football competitions, bringing together the child soldiers from different militias. They'd play football in the morning. Then they were given lunch and taught about the Christian faith through an Alpha course, if you've heard of that. In the afternoon, he gave them a course on peace building, the boys, and the girls were taught to sew by his wife, Claudeline. Bishop Desiree died of COVID, caught on one of those trips 20 months ago. He is enormously missed by many, including myself. But the impact he had and continues to have on countless lives shows what one person can achieve when we do what God gives us to do and leave him with the rest. Bishop Desiree also reminds us that peace building is done by the people who've experienced conflict. It can't be imposed by outsiders, however well-meaning, or forced on you by those who haven't lived with it. The people who've been hurt, who've been wounded and deeply scarred inside and out by conflict are the people who have to make peace. It takes risk and sacrifice. And then a third story. Many years ago, I traveled to Burundi, to the city of Bujumbura, just after the end of the Civil War. I used to go there quite regularly. It was still very tense with lots of fighting. I was invited to facilitate a 3-day conference of rebel and government, military and political leaders on reconciliation. On the third day of the meeting, by which time people had stopped being polite and started to say what they really mean, it's like the third day of Christmas, when you've had the whole family together. You know the feeling? Yes. Someone once said to me, "Where did you learn about peace building?" I said, "I've got 5 children." But on the third day of the meeting, a man in one part of the room, a brigadier in the regular army of Bujumbura, pointed across the room at someone else and he said, "In the war, that man led a militia that killed 30,000 people. How can I forgive him? How can I be reconciled with him?" And I looked out of the window across Lake Tanganyika. While trying to think what to say, I pointed out to the lake and I said to him, "If you go out in a boat on the lake and you fall out of the boat, what do?" He said, "I swim." And I said, "If you don't swim, what happens?" He said, "Well, I drown." And I said, well, if you don't reconcile, you will slaughter each other. The only thing that is riskier and more sacrificial than peace building is continued conflict, violent or subdued. We have looked at the role of the individual and communities in resolving conflict. But conflict happens at all levels of society, from the individual to the family, to communities, to countries, to the world, to the creation. The conflict of climate change, our hot war with creation, is playing out at every possible level. It's already affecting individuals in the poorest and most marginalized communities. In places like Mali or Nigeria, where farmer-herder conflicts tend to revolve around limited access to pasture. It's a direct cause of some conflicts is climate change, but also an indirect cause of so many others. It intensifies the suffering of the most vulnerable, and they move area to escape. And when they move area, they run into other people, and when they run into other people, they fight. An often used figure, estimated by Professor Norman Myers of Oxford University and cited by the IPCC and the Stern Review, is that there will be 200 million climate refugees by 2050. Last year I was in Rome at a conference at the Vatican of faith leaders ahead of COP26, and the head of the IPCC said they'd updated the figure, and at present rates it's looking more like 800 million. To put that in context, today we have roughly 85 million across the world. At the end of World War II, the greatest war in human history, we had about 25 million refugees. 800 million, 200 million, it's unimaginable. Our whole world will be changed. And it's going to begin happening sooner rather than later. And climate change is what the analysts call a significant force multiplier. Even if it's just 200 million who are directly affected, where they move to will be occupied and there will be struggles. We've already seen some of the impact of this on those who live along the River Nile, a source of life for several hundred million people, where a dam to help those upstream is threatening war by those downstream. It's easy to feel helpless and hopeless in the face of such massive problems. Yet, you have faced conflict. And this festival alone speaks clearly of risk-taking and sacrifice-making. Northern Ireland can testify to change, can share success and failure, setback and advance, and in so doing, can both advance itself and enable others to travel along with it. You are a sign of hope. But where do we start? I'm going to suggest 2 or 3 things. First, we start with identity. Identity is complicated, whether it's in the individual or in the community. You know that very, very well. And I've learned much more about that even this weekend. It goes down to all kinds of levels. When I worked as Dean of Liverpool, looking after Liverpool Cathedral, Anglican Cathedral, the first question I was asked was, are you red or blue? Are you a supporter of Liverpool or Everton? Well, whichever answer I gave was going to infuriate half the people of the city. So I said, I support anyone who's playing Manchester United. neat swerve there. Our identities so often set us apart, and we define our identity in contrast to others. I am not X. The 20th century showed the danger of being defined and identified by race. I'm Aryan. I'm not Jewish. I'm not a Slav. I'm not gay. I don't have disabilities. I don't have Down syndrome. And therefore, you won't kill me. I'm one of you. I belong to you. But what Jesus Christ does is gives us a new identity. God alone knows who we are really called to be. He gives us the identity we don't know. And that identity overcomes the ones we seek to create because we see images on TikTok and our friends at school or college tease and bully us. Or we feel we ought to have a particular identity defined by heredity, genetics, history, or mere sin. But in Peter's first letter, chapter 2, verses 9 to 11, Peter says to the Christians in what's now southwest Turkey, "But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy." You know, whenever we are tempted to draw lines between us and them, Jesus will always be found on the other side of the line. God calls us together into community. So maybe that's where we can start together, by reaffirming where we find our true identity. As beloved children of God, called to declare the praises of him who calls us out of darkness into light. And what does it look like in practice when it comes to building communities that look across difference and love, that transform violence into understanding? Well, I've said, seek identity in gift, in grace and positivity, not in negation and enemies. But second, embrace complexity. No conflict is simple. No peace building happens without setbacks, failures, risks and sacrifice. It's always complicated. Third, be patient and persistent. Peace and forgiveness are the work of decades, generations of fitful improvement. They will come, but there are no quick fixes. And what are the habits that build peace building, that form peace building? The team I was talking about earlier, which is based at Lambeth Palace, have written something called the Difference Course. It's on the web. And it talks about 3 habits to build peace. And you show them here in this festival, or what Pope Francis called fiesta. Sounds better, really, especially in February in Northern Europe. First habit, be curious. Develop a genuine curiosity about our competitors, our challengers, our enemies, our adversaries. Curiosity opens us to their humanity. It risks us seeing them not as a category, but as people. Secondly, be present. The ability to encounter and listen to those who might mean us harm. Being with people. Presence means sticking with it, listening, experiencing what they feel, not circling the wagons and seeking a safe place, which excludes all who do not agree with you. And that risks understanding that your enemies may not be entirely wrong. And third, reimagine. Be curious, be present, reimagine. Making change possible together, and with that being able to deliver sustainable peace. Reimagining conflict usually takes a whole community. This festival is very much these habits in action. Calling people to new places, to meet new people and hear new perspectives, and to respond with presence and curiosity and imagination. And to conclude by returning to Coventry Cathedral. In it is one of my favourite pictures, the Stalingrad Madonna. Again, look it up. Even on a screen, it's beautiful. It was drawn on paper in charcoal on Christmas Day 1942, almost 80 years ago, by a German medical officer in the Battle of Stalingrad, where his army, the army he belonged to, having first besieged Stalingrad, was by then under siege from the advancing Russian armies. He died a couple of years later in a prisoner of war camp. The picture, charcoal on paper, shows Mary, the mother of our Lord, huddled against the terrible cold, holding Jesus sheltered in a thin robe to her cheek. The Christ child shivers in the darkness, threatened by death, surrounded by hatred and conflict. The words Licht, Leben, Liebe, light, life and love, are down the side of the painting. This fragile child is God's answer to the power of war, to the darkness of sin, to the threat of death, to the chaos of conflict. This baby is the cornerstone of peace, the foundation of reconciliation, the promise of hope and life. In the infant Jesus, the power and presence of God is truly revealed. In a world where we cry out, "Have mercy, we want peace," the Christ child responds today, "Have hope, here is peace." In Colombia in 2010, an advertising agency came up with a unique Christmas campaign. Not the sort we might think of, John Lewis on the TV, but one to bring home guerrilla fighters living in the jungle, separated from their families for many years in the Colombian Civil War. In the campaign, they put Christmas trees all round the area where the guerrillas were living. They decorated them with lights and added a message: if Christmas can come to the jungle, you can come home. Demobilize. Everything is possible at Christmas. If God can come to us, we can always turn to him. And he will bring peace out of violence. And he will give us the resilience, like Desiree, the risk, like Provost Howard, the courage, the sacrifice, like that guide in Coventry. He will give us all those, that we continue and build peace that becomes lasting. He offers light amid the darkness. Blessed are the peacemakers, said Jesus, for they will be called the people of God. They're not archbishops and presidents. They're not made in declarations and gatherings and conferences. They're just people. As the children of God, which is all of us, no matter who we are or where we're from, our calling is to pursue the peace of God, who reconciles us to ourselves, us to God, us to one another, and us to our world. Amen.
We thought at this point that it would be very appropriate if we take some moments of silence. Then after silence, Bishop Noel Traynor will respond to the Archbishop's address.
My dear friends, from these moments of silence, the universal aspiration and desire for peace speaks to us from the words that Archbishop Justin has just shared with us this evening. And Archbishop Justin, as we listen to you talking about reconciliation and the way to it, via risk and sacrifice, self-sacrifice, one couldn't but think of Tony's father and mother, of the grandmother of Dana Masters, and of Dana herself, and those children. Nor indeed can we forget so many people who courageously, taking immense risk, whether in Burundi or in South Sudan or in Colombia or here, who risked crossing the line. By doing so, they walked in the light of Christ, in the light of the Word of God. If I may share a thought with you. When I was asked to come here in 2008, one wondered about a motto. And during a retreat before coming here with the Benedictines in Maritzu in Belgium, reading St. Paul, it struck me one day, or perhaps I was inspired, to choose as a line for my cooperative work and ministry here with the people of God, and by that I mean the people of God in all Christian traditions and in the entire Christian family, to choose those words, walk as people of the light. So Archbishop Justin, thank you for sharing your experiences this evening, reaching right through and around this planet, and reminding us that notwithstanding the pain and the suffering of so many decades and indeed of centuries here, that together many of us have stepped across the line, and you encourage us through your witness to continue doing so as sons, daughters and sons of the light of Christ. We thank you. We thank you for coming. We thank you for the witness as a faith leader, not only in England and Wales, but also throughout the entire Anglican Communion around the world, what you have done and promoted by way of peace building with other faith leaders around our world. Our times, my friends, needs the inspiration and the light of God become a human person who has walked this earth. And may we all be inspired this evening by this coming together in St. Peter's Cathedral, Belfast, at the behest of all of those four-cornered, jacketed agents and artists. And our thanks to Archbishop Justin, to those representing literature and thought, to those representing music and song, and of course to all of us responding to the Word of God, the source of light for us and for all humanity. Archbishop Justin, we wish you well, a safe journey back along with Father Hutchison, and we pray God's blessing upon your ministry and indeed, if I may say so and add, upon the work of the preparation and the achievement of the Lambeth Conference in the summer of this year, when you will, walk, listen, and subsequently witness, together for the good of all and for the entire human family. Thank you, and God bless you.
Would you mind if I sing one more song for you? Thank you. Oh, you're so lovely. I'm very moved by what has occurred here tonight, as I'm sure you are too. In the biblical scriptures, there's a book called Hebrews, chapter 12, and it talks about a great cloud of witnesses. As a kid, I never knew what that meant. But I have to say that every time I get to share the stories of my family and my community, I have that sense that I am surrounded by the ones who have gone before me. A great cloud of witnesses. And when I sing this next song, I feel that ever so strongly. And I hope that tonight we're encouraged. We have a lot of work to do, a long road ahead of us. And it's very tempting to look at the news and the headlines and feel hopeless. But, like the writer of Hebrews said, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, people who have gone through far more difficult things than we faced and continue to hope, we can follow their lead. This song was written by an incredible songwriter named Sam Cooke, who wrote it during the time of the Civil Rights Movement. And it's called "A Change Is Gonna Come." I was born by a river in a little tent, and oh, just like the river I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come. Oh, yes, it is. It's been too hard living, but I am afraid to die, 'cause I don't know what's out there beyond the skies. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come. Oh, yes, it is. There were times when I thought I wouldn't last for long. Oh, but somehow I've been able to carry on. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come. Oh, yes, it is. Thank you.
Get over there quick or there'll be a way home.
I think you should hear that stage whisper. He said to me, "Get over there quicker or there'll be a way home." We're now coming right at the end, and I want to say a few words of thanks, and I will keep them few. Thanks to all those who have supported these events in the course of the last week, some people over a number of evenings. Thank you also to those who are watching online for your support as well, those who support us in so many different ways, not only financially, and thank you for that, and we've already mentioned that earlier, as we've also mentioned, we reminder about the questionnaires, and that's it for now. But also through your encouragement, and Archbishop Justin mentioned that he's here to encourage us, and he certainly did a wonderful job at that. But thank you for all those who have sent emails, or texts, or phones, or come up to us, enormously helpful, and for that we're really grateful. Thanks to all those who made their facilities available, have offered hospitality in so many different ways, including here this evening. Father Martin, you have been absolutely incredible. Thank you for your patience with Steve and I as the running order kept changing, and we had no idea what was happening next, because we didn't either. We recently had the opportunity to share a Sunday service in Radio 4, then Radio Ulster, and the producer said to us, "With you two, it feels like you're busking." Which is pretty accurate. Just a huge word of thanks. And as I finish, could I also thank especially our incredible administrator, Megan. And this... I'm not sure if she is. And this incredible bunch, this committee and directors. And if you were at any of our meetings, if you've been involved in any of our email contacts, or if you know any of us, you know how disorganised we can be and how chaotic it is. And so it's a miracle that there's a festival, never mind 10 of them at the end of it. But I think it works. I think primarily because we like and love one another. And I think that's why their festivals are here. And to each of them, can I say a huge word of thanks for that. Steve.
Yes, there's sometimes when this festival's too much Martin and Steve, and everybody you've seen in a hoodie tonight, not all of them are up here. It's really quite amazing how we meet for once a month and laugh the whole time, and we end up with this. And that's only because I think in our laughter we're trying to keep up with God, and I think He's already ahead of us for the next festival. They're not here just so that you can see them. We're going to end with a sending prayer that Martin and I put together for an event that we did a few years ago. And so we're going to take a line each on this. And it's a sending prayer for all of us as we go out to try and bring this peace to our wounded but wonderful city. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you.
Go into a world that is divided with forgiveness.
Go into a world that is broken with healing.
Go into a world that is hungry with food.
Go into a world that is lonely with presence.
Go into a world that is hurting with empathy.
Go into a world that is striving with grace.
Go into a world that is alienated with love.
Go into a world that is at war with peace.
Go into a world that is lost with salvation.
As the Father has sent me, I am sending you.
Go. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
It's done. Thank you so much.
I forgot to mention